Welcome back, guys, to another episode of CasTuah. Last time we talked about TOK, a very special segment of the IB curriculum. This time we'll be moving forwards and talking about the extended essay, which is also a very important part of the IB curriculum, as well as IAs, which many students will have to face throughout their journey in the IB program. So without further ado, I'll pass it on to Lucas.
Yeah, sorry about that. I had to cough for a second. But yeah, before we go any further, you might notice that we have a new member today. His name's Owen. He's another grade 12 student at Maryville. Would you like to say anything about yourself, Owen?
Yeah, hey everyone, I'm Owen. Like Lucas said, I'm a peer of these students, and I'm thrilled to join the podcast. So yeah.
Yeah, thanks for that, Owen. I guess we can start with our discussion then for EE, right? First.
Right. So, like I said earlier, the EE stands for the extended essay, which is very similar to the TOK essay in the way that it's special to the IB students. It's basically a 4,000 word essay where the student will choose a topic of their choice and write a very long essay with research and proper formatting, which is a pretty long process that goes from grade 11 to grade 12. And this is a IB requirement, so every single student will have to do it regardless of the courses or career path that they choose. So moving on, I'll pass it to Nelson. Do you have anything you want to say about the extended essay?
All right. So in this process, you sort of will submit sort of a form that will gauge your interest in what sort of subject that you will want to write your EEN. And afterwards, based on like subject availability, you'll be paired with a sort of like a mentor teacher in that field that will sort of help guide you and provide you resources. And yeah, just general guidance as you like throughout the whole writing process. And this is really helpful. They're also there to help you with writing your like EE reflections, which there will be 3 of which that you will need to complete. And that is also part of just the EE in general. And yeah, Lucas, you got anything to add?
Yeah, I think just to add on to the subjects, something to note is that it's normally restricted to like the subjects you might be learning at school. So like specifically, firstly, generally they recommend to do a course you're taking. So like me, for example, I probably wouldn't do a digital societies EE because I took geography. But there are some caveats. For instance, if there's a course that's not offered at your school, you can still technically take it. I think Nelson did this and did a CSEE, even though like initially he put it as math EE. We can talk more about that later, but yeah, just so you know, the EE is just a place for you to explore something you have an interest in, and then while also learning about like research and that sort of thing, right? So don't take it with too much stress, but of course there is some like difficulties with it. Duncan, do you want to talk about any of those?
Right. I think one of the hardest parts about deciding your EE is really getting a feel for what kind of subject you really want to do, because you'll be taking for the bulk of IP2. Me personally, I decided to choose history because there were a lot of analytical stuff, and I really wanted to dive deep into the different historical debates that happened between one particular event. And the event that I chose was the American occupation on Japan. And also because the supervisors seemed pretty chill, they seemed very helpful. For example, Mr. Parsons, Mr. Polisena. So yeah, there's definitely a lot of different factors to be with considering when you're deciding your EE topic, because the topic is really important. You want to stay interested to write those 4,000 words. Anyone else want to add to that?
Yeah, guys, I can add on to that. So, like Duncan said, choosing the topic is very important, but I'd say even choosing which subject you're doing is very important as well, right? So, for me, I chose math because, well, I'm really interested in math. I plan on pursuing, like a related field in university, like computer science or engineering. So by choosing like a subject or a field that you're interested in, not only will the actual essay be easier, but maybe it will even benefit you in the future, right? So you can get some nice practice in. Yeah.
Right. And building onto that, choosing a topic that you're interested in is extremely important since, mind you, it is a 4,000 word essay. It is not a small sum. However, you also do have to understand that throughout your journey, which is a difficulty that I personally had to go through, is being concise with my research. I did a digital society EE on the ethics behind generative AI and music. And I realized that this is an extremely broad topic, and I had to make it more concise many, many times. I ended up having over 8,000 words at one point throughout my draft, and this ended up being way too much and way over the word count. So even though it's 4,000 words, sorry, you shouldn't be too hung up on the word count because you're gonna realize very soon that this isn't actually a lot of words, and that you're gonna be forced to cut down a lot. So be mindful about what you write and be concise, since 4,000 words is actually not as much as you think.
Yeah, and on the opposite side of the spectrum, so like Kunyun talked about how like for research you might have a lot of stuff to write about. For more experimental procedures, for example, mine I did a math IA analyzing muscle activation using Fourier transform, and I used my own Arduino to do this. So yeah, it was like more experimental. Something to note with this or with any type of experimental one, experiment is that often you won't actually get a final result, or the final result you want might not be what you were expecting. Something that was emphasized to me multiple times by my supervisor was simply that it doesn't matter that you actually like get a right answer. There's no such thing as a right answer or even a final answer. You just want to get something that you can talk about. 4,000 words, that's basically enough.
Right. And yeah, just to touch upon like the experimental exploration type of side of the EE, in my opinion, the hardest part is really to just find what you want to discuss, like what you want to research, and like find specific sources of research or how you can like carry out this experiment. The writing part, in my opinion, is not the hardest part. Once you know, get a feel for what you're trying to talk about, you definitely find something you're interested in, and also get a broad or general idea of what you want to go into for experiment, or like Lucas said, or in terms of research like I did, be very vocal and be very proactive with what you choose as your sources.
Right. I think that's a very good summary of the EE. And overall, so just a quick recap, just make sure you're interested, make sure that you understand what you're doing, whether it's a research IA or an experimental, a EE, not IA, whether it's experimental or research, that you be mindful of the word count and be mindful of your research. And as well as be sure to remember to do the reflections, since there are 3 of them. Those are very important. If you do not do them, they can affect your grade since they are included. And be sure to talk to your counselor or teacher for guidance. And that wraps it up for the extended essay section.
If I could interject for 1 second.
Oh, yes.
Yeah. I think in terms of writing, we've given some tips, but one thing to note, or one thing I do want to make note of, is that the EE only impacts your IB mark, meaning like your diploma score on 4 out of 45. It is part of that extra 3, right? Because you take 6 courses, the max you get is 7. It's part of that extra 3 along with the TOK essay and exhibition, I believe. So what this means is if you're applying to like Ontario universities only, for example, and you are from Ontario, if you didn't want to, this could be a pass-fail assignment. I think for many of us, although it was something we were interested in, it wasn't like something that we had to do uber well on, for example. It was just more of, I want to research this, and if I don't do super well, I'm fine with that. Because once again, you know, it doesn't impact your actual grades for universities, scholarships, anything.
Right. That's great. So that just puts more emphasis on make sure to have a topic you're really passionate about.
Yeah, absolutely.
And it looks here that we have Dao joining us a bit late, but welcome, Dao. We're on episode 3, which is about EEs and IAs. Okay. Dao's feeling a little bit under the weather today, so He will
And
have his
that's why
camera
we
off.
got his substitute, Owen,
Yep.
for today. And he would do a phenomenal job just covering for the EE and the IAs. And speaking of the IAs, I think now is a good time to transition into subs. So take it away, Nelson.
Yeah. So actually, one more thing on the EEs. Actually, most of the time you're given to write your EE is actually during the summer. So it is highly suggested that you do finish the bulk of your EE during the summer, because you definitely don't want it to drag out and be writing like most of your EE, which is 4,000 word essay. Definitely not light work. You don't want to be doing that while you're dealing with all the chaos of IB2 and like all the other requirements, such as like your IAs, your TOK essays, and your other coursework. So yeah, you definitely do want to be finishing most of it throughout your summer. But anyways, moving on to IAs, there's sort of like a requirement for most actually every single IA course that you take. Most of them is like experimental research based, but for the languages such as like English and French, they're like sort of like an internal oral assessment. So IA does stand for internal assessment, and is sort of like this sort of report that you complete in most cases, that your teacher marks and is sent to the IB to be like I don't know, re-adjudicated. And yeah. Oh, and you want to expand more on the requirements?
Yeah, definitely. So, IAs, usually it's worth around like 30% or 20% of your IB grade, and usually a significant portion of the mark that would appear on your Ontario report card as well. So these IAs are really important, and you want to make sure that you follow all the requirements, right? So an IA, the whole point is to demonstrate your learning of the curriculum. They're shorter than EEs, so maybe around like 2K words, 3K words. Definitely shorter than an EE. But I guess each different subject is different. So maybe I'll just talk a bit about, let's say, French IA, because I did pretty well on that. I'm not gonna lie. So the French IA, it's just a short interview. I was in SL, so maybe someone from HL. I don't know if there is someone from HL, but they could talk about that. But it's just a short interview, maybe like 10 to 15 minutes, where the teacher will show you a image, and then you need to talk about that image, like describe it, and then make connections to the course. So I found that it was pretty easy. I didn't really prepare that much, and I got a 6, which is what I was more than satisfied with. So yeah, if anyone else would like to talk about a different IA, you can take it away here.
Yeah, I'll just build a little bit upon French and then move on to English IAs since they're relatively similar. So as Owen said, I am taking HL French right now, and the only difference between HL IAs and SL IAs is the mark band, really. The formatting is pretty much the same, although you do have to do a little bit more since for SL you don't really have to read any class text for the IA. While for HL French, you need to use specific text that you've done in class for the IAs. Other than that, the time duration is both 15 minutes, and other than that, the mark band is just a bit different. So moving on to English IAs, this is probably the IA that a lot of people will stress most about, since it is an oral IA as well, while the other ones are mostly written on documents. So this one is a bit more, maybe a bit more stressful for those who don't really like face-to-face interviews, stuff like that. So this is the English IA is called an IOP, an internal oral presentation, where you are basically doing a 10-minute presentation about two texts that you've done in your IB1 or IB2 years. And these two texts the two texts that I've chosen was the three body problem plus things fall apart. Both texts are from two very different authors, and take place in very different settings, and basically you just have to explore the two texts and talk about themes and compare them, contrast them, and just basically make a oral presentation that really suits the prompt that the questions that the teacher will pose to you. Overall, though, the English IA was pretty stressful, in my opinion, out of all the IAs that I have done. So I'm say that most students will probably struggle most on the English IA compared to the other ones. And talking about other IAs, Duncan, would you like to talk about a different one?
Right. Yeah, it really depends on what kind of person you are for the IAs. And what I mean by that is that if your time management is one of the weaker skills that you have, maybe you'll struggle with the science ones because those are very time dependent, and it depends on how you structure your time accordingly to complete all the requirements of the IA on time. And as Kanye mentioned, if you're more stressed about face computations, then perhaps English is more stressful to you as opposed to something that requires more time. For me, I think I struggled the most with chemistry and biology IA because I'm not that good at time management, and therefore I found myself doing and cramming a lot of the requirements for the IAs to do at the very end. For these types of science IAs, you could either choose a research-based question IA or an experimental IA in which you were to design your own research question. For example, I did how does chickpea concentration affect the trypsin activity, which is an enzyme within the human intestinal tract, and as a result, I had to plan an experiment in class and to do within the week before the winter break. And after getting all my data, I had to write a data analysis about what to do and how I could analyze the data and whether or not I could find any trends or connections between chickpea concentration and trypsin enzyme. And for science IAs, it is not necessarily about the data being precise or accurate. Your data could be the most accurate, could be the best data you could pose, but if the writing itself, if the explanation is not good, then you would score a weaker IA mark compared to someone who might have had a weaker data but had a very good explanation to this data, how they made connections, what kinds of trends did they do, what limitations or weaknesses did they find within the experiment that limited their data in the first place. So it really is about your discussion, about your writing, and how you could think to present the data accordingly to the requirements of each IA. And all of these, like I said before, require a lot of time management to do really well on. So, would you like to expand on this?
Yeah. Do you mind if I go?
You can take it away here.
Yeah, thanks, man.
Spoken in a while.
Yeah. I guess I'll talk about the final science, which was physics. So physics, like the other two sciences, was very similar. As Duncan mentioned, it's more about like how you write about your results rather than if you get it right or wrong. Something to note is that apparently, and don't quote me on this, but like one of the moderators or AOs or something for IB Physics wrote like a guide sort of, and then like on it says to have all your like evaluation, conclusion, variables, all that in like paragraphs instead of tables, because then the flow is better. I think that's one of the major differences between chemistry and physics is just that it's a lot less tabulation, but I might be wrong. Maybe there is no downside to either. But yeah, for me and for I think a lot of the other people in this call when they did the physics IA, they wrote it in paragraphs. And then I guess we can also talk about a bit about the math IA. I think we should separate this into HL and SL because there are some differences. I'm not aware of the SL ones, but basically for the math IA, the main you basically choose any topic you really want to study regarding math that you can apply course content to. The only restriction is that you have to apply enough HL course content. So like specifically things like first principles, L'Hopital's rule, what else? Maybe like Bayes' theorem, so those types of things. And then one interesting thing is that there is no word limit for this. So yeah, you can write as much as you want, basically. Yeah, does anyone from SL want to talk about their experiences doing it?
Yeah. So like Lucas said, you can really talk about anything you want for these math IAs. And like for example, I chose a topic that was extremely out of the ordinary, which is explaining an anime character's powers through the use of calculus. And even though you might not think there's much math within this topic, I actually managed to score a 15, which was which is a decent score for a math IA, which is a 6. And I feel like that as long as you find, just like the EE, as long as you find something that you're truly interested in, and is not just completely deviant from math, you can definitely score pretty decent on the math IA. Since like employing the math content isn't that hard as long as there's some connection. And Nelson, would you like to talk a bit more about it?
Yeah. Another thing, I did my eye on like sort of the optimal shooting angle for a basketball. Again, is one of like sort of my passions, something that I'm super interested in. And yeah, I even managed to like incorporate some like computer science and some code to run like some simulations for it. And that worked completely fine. Yeah, I think the main part is as long as you make sure your use of mathematics is like reasonable and applicable to your subject, and also like your writing and like your explanation and your reflection, like you're sort of reflecting throughout your whole IA process. This is sort of true for every single like sciences IA. You definitely want to be reflecting on your process throughout the whole paper. That's definitely one of the largest points. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, I just like to jump in.
Yeah.
Just one last thing about the math. I feel like on top of mathematics presentation, communication is also very key. Your math could be like the most standout and the most out of the box or critical, but if it's not presented correctly, then you would lose. Because at the end of the day, it's with the way you really present your data, and as Nelson said, make connections with it. So make sure to have everything optimized within tables, format it correctly, and also contact and also have people read it, have several people read it and see if it has good flow and if they can understand the math. And if not, maybe you need to go back and make some tweaks to it so that it becomes the most optimal copy and you don't score a 9 out of 20 like me, which is a low IB4.
Right. So just to wrap up the the IA section, we just want to go over the very general parts of the IA. So the IA is worth 20% of your IB grade, and it's an assessment that doesn't really have many time constraints, although there's definitely the due date, but it's you can most people can meet it on time, and as long as you don't procrastinate to the very last minute, you should be able to do relatively well. Overall, while it really isn't a word limit for like the math specifically, you should also limit it to like 12 to 20 pages. It shouldn't be so exceedingly long that the teachers will have to spend days reading and marking it, right? So make sure to also always be concise and always be straightforward with your explanations and your research. So, yeah, that basically wraps up the IA section, unless there's some last little things that anyone has to add.
Yeah, I think we actually did forget to cover the Group 3 IAs, but I don't think there's anything too special about them. I'll just talk quickly about the Geo one. Basically, for the geography one, at least like in Maryville, you'll get to go on a little field trip in IB1, collect some data, and start your IA then. And then from there, you're given a fieldwork question. You just have to make your own hypotheses. So it's a lot more constrained than some of the other subjects in terms of what you can do. But there's definitely still a lot of avenues for how you can explore it. And you just need to continuously apply course content and like statistical methods like Pearson's product, for example. Yeah.
Right. All right. I think that
wraps up for today.
Yep, that wraps up this episode, and thank you guys. And we hope you have if you have any questions or comments, please leave it down below, and we'll see you guys in the next episode. Thank you.
Yeah.
Yo, what happened?